6 people were in the room, nervously waiting for the cafe manager. He was usually punctual, but after a few more minutes, Santiago Guerrero appeared at the door. He briefly greeted his subordinates. "I assume you all remember that the cafe owner visits twice a year to check on things," he began coldly. "So, I want to warn you not to engage in unnecessary conversations. In fact, I'd ask you to remain silent. I'll handle the discussion myself. Understood?" He looked intently at the employees. Everyone stood with their heads down. No one wanted to talk to the boss. "Very well," he said, satisfied. "If anyone still doesn't understand what I just said, rest assured you won't be working here anymore. I'll take care of it." The manager concluded his warning to his subordinates, and a man in a police uniform entered the cafe. "All right, everyone get to work," ordered the manager. "Today you'll stay late to organize the cafe. Everything must look perfect for tomorrow." He shook hands with the police officer, and they walked together to the office. The cafe employees started moving. One group prepared food in the kitchen and served customers, while another cleaned floors, washed windows, and scrubbed pots. The day was very challenging, not only because everything needed to be spotless before the owner's arrival, but also because the manager worked on site all day. Santiago Guerrero was a tough man, one might say extremely tough. He didn't know how to talk to people. No, he didn't scold or insult his subordinates. He literally didn't talk to them. The boss said a few words and left, and no one guessed what he was thinking. Thus, he could easily fire someone without warning, simply saying that person shouldn't return. It was always shocking. He never explained or listened to the person. The manager just fired the employee and left. His employees were somewhat afraid of him, perceiving cruelty and inhumanity in him. The only reason many wanted to work at the cafe was the salary. The restaurant owner paid regularly and never delayed payments. Everyone was officially employed and received bonuses several times a year. So, despite the manager's unpredictable nature, no one objected. Many wanted to join the cafe because they had loans to pay, and the official salary allowed them to solve these problems. The cafe was located in a provincial town on a federal highway. For this reason, there were always many people, as locals, truckers, and tourists liked the place. The staff also cooked quite well, and there were never any complaints about the food quality. One of the waiters had been working there for 5 years. Miguel had survived almost 3 complete rotations of staff, but never contradicted the manager or said anything to him. The newest employee was the dishwasher, Laura. She was hired 4 months ago. At 8 o'clock, everything was finished. The cafe gleamed. Santiago inspected everything thoroughly and said nothing. It was hard to tell if he was satisfied, but he left half an hour later. Everyone hurried to gather their things and go home. At 7 the next morning, everyone was back at work. Another thorough cleaning was done, tablecloths were adjusted, and fresh flowers were arranged. Laura swept the area around the cafe up to the highway. Around 9, some unknown people started to arrive. Laura was working in the kitchen and initially didn't pay much attention, but when she entered the dining area, she noticed 10 people waiting there. They were all well-dressed, and the women had elegant hairstyles. Maybe they're friends or guests of the restaurant owner, Laura thought. Who knows what these rich people have in mind? But her surprise knew no bounds when more strangers soon joined them. "Lino, who are these people?" The dishwasher couldn't resist and whispered to the chef. "Laura, wait. You'll see for yourself in a moment." He winked at her mysteriously. At 10, the boss arrived. He looked like a Hollywood actor. His light jacket complemented his sun-kissed skin, and his white teeth highlighted his brown eyes. Santiago Guerrero called all the employees to the dining area. "I'll remind you once more that everyone must remain silent," the stern man said. and his authority was evident in his voice. "I will be the only one speaking." Laura looked around. She was surrounded by strangers and examined them curiously one by one. "And now I'll divide you into 2 groups." Santiago's voice distracted her. "Stand where I tell you." Everyone in the dining area was divided into 2 large groups, with a few more standing apart from them. "He's here!" someone shouted. The boss hurried outside. It was visible how he shook someone's hand and talked incessantly. Finally, the cafe door opened and the owner entered. He was probably around 50 years old, but looked young. His body was slender, his slightly curly hair reached his shoulders, and his green eyes made him handsome. The man smiled broadly and said something. "Welcome your team, Arturo," Santiago said cheerfully. Laura watched in shock. For the first time, she saw a smile on the manager's face. "No, not team members, but comrades and colleagues," Arturo replied kindly. "Hello, friends. If anyone doesn't know me, my name is Arturo Hidalgo. I bought this cafe many years ago to gain new experiences and create jobs for the local community. I apologize for not being here often due to another job, but if you have any questions or requests, please let me know. I'll be happy to listen and help." He looked at their faces with affection, but as soon as he offered to speak, everyone quickly looked down. "What can you say other than thank you?" the manager asked. "You've done so much for us. We all appreciate and are satisfied with everything." He moved around Arturo like a snake, speaking non-stop. "Look," he gestured. "Here's our first shift. The chef, cook, kitchen assistant, dishwasher, cleaner, and delivery person. And here are 2 waiters and the floor manager. The same number of people work in the second shift, and here are our accountant, lawyer, and chief manager. In total, including me, we are 22 people. This is our complete staff. I am very grateful to all of you," the cafe owner said to his team. "Thank you all for your work. You're wonderful. I think we can celebrate our meeting. Santiago, please give everyone a bonus this month." The cafe owner didn't stay long. After half an hour, he thanked everyone again and left. What was that? Laura looked at the chef, puzzled. "Why have I never seen these people in our cafe? I don't understand at all." "What's there to understand, Laura?" Lino sighed. "These are all ghost employees. Actually, only 6 people work in the cafe. We work like horses, 1 doing the job of 3, while officially we have 21 employees." "But how is that possible?" she wondered. "And why?" "Don't you get it?" he said angrily. "The manager pockets all that money, Laura. Better forget about it, or else what?" the dishwasher asked, surprised. "In the end, the owner will find out." "Haven't you heard of Fernando Arias?" he asked. "He was one of the best chefs here." "No, what happened to him?" Laura asked with interest. 3 years ago, he tried to uncover the truth, but drugs were found at his workplace," Lino whispered. "Have you seen that cop who comes here regularly? They say he framed Fernando. They wanted to send him to jail, but the cop later demanded a large sum to drop the case. Fernando sold everything he had and even borrowed from people. 2 years ago, he left and no one has seen him since." "Oh my God!" Laura exclaimed, terrified. "I had no idea such things could happen here." "Better keep quiet," the chef warned. "The manager is unpredictable. He could come and tell you that you no longer work here, but that's nothing. If he finds out you're digging into his affairs or talking about it, you'll have bigger problems." That day, Laura went home in shock. On one hand, she was scared to go to work. On the other, a feeling of protest awakened in her, and she really wanted to uncover the truth. "Laura, stop!" she told herself out loud. "You'll really get into trouble." Laura moved to the city a year ago. In her hometown, there were such things too. The administrator embezzled money but didn't seem so sinister. He just took some money and pocketed it. But here, Santiago received a monthly salary for 15 phantom employees, and that was too much. Laura was 50 and didn't want to leave her hometown. After her son was born many years ago, her husband left. She was actually happy because he was a drunkard and she couldn't stand him anymore. As soon as Enrique disappeared, she jumped for joy. She didn't ask for child support and didn't want to. Enrique left her and the kids a house, and Laura had her conscience. He didn't want to communicate with the kids either, so she raised her daughter and son alone. When her daughter turned 18, she left home and disappeared. One day she called her mother and said, "I won't come back. I don't need you or the town, so forget about me." Laura cried for a while, constantly thinking she had done something wrong, but later, when her son Job grew up, she calmed down. Job adored his mother, and they stayed friends. "Mom, leave the town," her son once said. "I won't come back there. Do you know how much work I have? I can't drive on those bad roads. And who will farm your 30 acres and why?" "Job, how can I leave everything?" cried Laura. "I can't live without my home." "You're saying that now?" He got angry. "But when you're 60 or 70, remember why Grandpa Nemesio died? The ambulance couldn't reach him because of the bad roads." "Well, what do you suggest I do? I'm just a woman." "Leave," Job said. "Basilio is taking so much money that they'll soon shut down your job for lack of profitability." "Oh, I don't know, Job," Laura sighed. "Maybe you're right. But when you're over 50, you know how hard it is to change your life." "Do you think it'll be easier at 70? He insisted. "Better do it now." Laura hesitated for about a year, but then her left arm hurt so much she couldn't do anything in her garden. She needed constant treatments and physiotherapy, and going to the city was a challenge, with flooded roads or broken buses. All this made her nervous, and she finally decided to move to the city. Laura spent almost 6 months treating her shoulder, but then her arm started moving normally, and the pain disappeared. By chance, she got a job as a dishwasher. She was in that part of the city and entered a cafe. They sold delicious pastries. She bought some and ate them at a table. Suddenly, a guy posted a sign. "Dishwasher wanted. 2 days on, 2 days off, 7 to 8. Official employment. Contact cafe staff." She read it. She approached the person behind the counter, who turned out to be the waiter, Miguel. He explained all the conditions. "The only bad thing is, our manager is very strict." He whispered in her ear, "I could fire you without a reason." This didn't deter Laura, and the next day she was already walking in with a neat apron and cap. In fact, she wasn't just a dishwasher, she was also a chef's assistant, cleaner, and sometimes a courier. Overall, the three of them could easily replace each other. They had a catastrophic shortage of staff, and by the end of the day, everyone was exhausted. Laura went home, but she couldn't get what happened today out of her head. The cafe owner seemed like a kind person. She could see care for people and a desire to help them in his eyes, and he seemed to radiate something. When Santiago was at the cafe, everyone was gloomy. His mere presence created a strong internal discomfort. Laura had never met anyone like him before, and she found it hard to know how to react to him. It seemed that everyone was just empty space to him. That's why the manager tried to stay silent, not to unnecessarily confirm his importance. Perhaps it was the height of arrogance, or maybe Santiago was simply afraid of rebellion. In any case, 4 months passed and the dishwasher still couldn't decide what kind of person he was. The next day was Laura's day off. They worked so hard that these 2 days off were simply not enough. On the first day, they just wanted to sleep, and only on the second did they get to do household chores. Laura had been lying in bed for a long time. She really didn't want to get up. But today, Laura planned to do a few things, so she was already at the station by 11. A week ago, Laura made raspberry jam and Job's favorite tomatoes. Tomorrow, she wanted to give him some jars. She just needed to meet the intercity bus. They had done this several times and never had any problems. Job turned 23 this year and had been working in an office for a whole year. His city was a district centre, and life there was much more expensive. At first, the boy wanted to save up for a car to visit his mother, so he saved on everything. During this time, Laura had also saved some money, so she planned to buy a car soon. "Mum, maybe you should keep your money," said Laura's son. "I can manage for another 3 months and then I'll have enough." "What if you need it, Mum?" "Job, let's hurry and buy a car. At least I'll see you more often," said Laura with irritation. "I moved to the city and still see you rarely. Job, I miss you." "Yes, I understand," sighed the boy. He worked until exhaustion to get promoted. "With this salary, I won't get far, much less buy an apartment there." Laura arrived at the station, which was not far from her house. "So the bus will be at 8, 12, 3 and 5 tomorrow," she read from the schedule on August 18th. "Okay then, at 5. Job will have time to catch it after work," Laura decided. She didn't want to go home, so she headed to the city park. You could say that on one hand, Laura had already gotten used to the city and felt no attraction to the village, but sometimes her heart ached so much that she just wanted to scream. The city's atmosphere, with numerous people, sometimes pressed so hard that there was simply no room to breathe. Laura wanted open space, but she was surrounded by houses everywhere. Of course, there was also a private sector, but Laura thought she was already tired of her garden, so she decided to buy an apartment. But now she doubted her choice. "If only I could go out to the garden or the orchard now with my cat or dog," thought the woman. "I would dig quietly. What bliss. And here I am, sitting in this apartment." Laura was angry. "How I miss the flowers. I don't have enough on my balcony. What's there? A box with petunias and portulaca, and I want roses, daffodils and tulips." She didn't notice how she arrived at the park. At some point, this place was beautiful. Blue spruces, tall pines, and large flower beds. But now, no one took care of them. That's why here and there decapitated conifers flashed, which the locals cut down for the new year. The flower beds were in a deplorable state. Nothing had grown in them for a long time. Only some parts of the benches were visible. Visitors put something under them and sat on the remaining edges. In short, it was a provincial city. The woman noticed somewhere in the distance a normal bench with 2 crossed bars. She was tired and sat on it. The tall trees created shade, and it was pleasant to breathe. Here and there, people strolled slowly. Laura watched the passers-by. She especially liked an elderly couple walking hand in hand. "I'd like to hold my loved one's hand and walk with him somewhere," she thought sadly. "But where can I find him? So I'll live my life alone." When Laura moved to the city, deep down she hoped she could meet someone, but a year had passed and she realized it wasn't that easy. Good men had been taken a long time ago, and she could find a man just to have fun with in the village. The woman dreamed of something more. She wanted more than just romance. She wanted to find a lover and a friend in one person. But, as she understood, it was extremely rare to find someone like that. The phone rang. "Job, hello," exclaimed his mother. "So, will you meet me at the bus station tomorrow? It'll be at 6:30. "Hello, Mom." He sounded cheerful. Of course, How are you in general? Are you at work today? No, thank God, I have the day off, she replied. I'm walking in the park, sitting here and missing my own garden. Mum, Job was annoyed. Why do you need it? Isn't your balcony enough? Job, what can I plant there? Laura said disappointedly. I want my own house. She finally said, Mum, let's think about it. But not now. Let's get through this winter first, then we'll see. Her son replied discontentedly. That would be great, she rejoiced. We could prepare for the new season. All right, we will, don't worry, said Job cheerfully. Well, Mom, I've got to go. Laura closed her eyes contentedly. She imagined a field where she was happily digging up potatoes, drying apples, shelling beans, and planting roses. Maybe I could even get a cow, Laura dreamed, and then stopped herself. I'm being silly. For what, Laura? Stop it. She laughed. The woman sat a bit longer and then headed home. On her way, she passed by the stores and bought some groceries. She really wanted coffee, so she went to the cafe near her house and bought a walnut roll. She spent the rest of her weekend doing house chores. She delivered jars of preserves to her son and dedicated the rest of the afternoon to watching TV. Lately, Laura had developed a desire to read more. Her father in the village had a large library, and she had loved books since childhood, but she was often so tired from work that she just wanted to rest. Laura glanced at the book on the table. To Kill a Mockingbird. She picked it up, but immediately put it down. I don't feel like reading today. I'd rather watch TV, she told herself. In fact, during weekends, the dishwasher completely forgot about work. When her next shift came, she entered as usual, in a good mood. The tourist season was winding down, and there were fewer people. October was about to end. The workers sighed with relief, but the news from the director the day before made them especially happy. I won't be here for 2 weeks, he said with little interest. We'll work as usual, at full capacity. Lino, you'll be in charge of your shift. Rodrigo will take care of the other. He said nothing more, turned around and went to his car. Incidentally, Santiago had recently changed it. Everyone understood perfectly where he got it from. Hurrah! Lino exclaimed cheerfully the next day. I was starting to be afraid to breathe. Sometimes he comes and looks at me and I think, what does he want? Either he's going to fire me or say something. Everything is strange in general, Laura sighed. That's how they treat subordinates. We're afraid to say a word to him. Exactly, Miguel chimed in. I've worked for him for many years, but I still don't understand what goes through his mind. If it weren't for my sick mother, I would have quit long ago. I have to pay for expensive medicine. The restaurant owner seemed like a kind person, said the dishwasher, and he spoke to us with respect and warmth. Laura, if he lived nearby, it would be different, the chef replied. But he comes here twice a year, and yet our director scares us so much that we can't even say a word. The team had 2 weeks of pure relaxation. On one hand, it was unusual. They constantly felt like the boss was watching them. On the other hand, the tension eased, and they relaxed. Work became enjoyable. Now, I can sleep at night, Lino said once. But with him, you spend the whole night thinking about what he'll throw at you the next day. I remember when he fired Alex and Lorenza for no reason. He just walked up to them and said, You don't work here anymore. I'm expecting your resignation letters. None of us still know why. I still feel bad about Fernando, Miguel said sadly. He was a good chef, didn't drink or smoke, and really tried to defend everyone. But the boss twisted everything and then took revenge on him. There was 1 day left before the director returned from vacation. The workers polished everything to perfection, so he would have nothing to complain about. The next day, it was the boss's shift. "Oh, I really don't want to go to work," Laura sighed loudly. She paused in the hallway for a moment and then went outside. She walked slowly to the bus stop. The autumn rain was falling, and it was cold. By 10 to 7, Laura was already at work. Everyone was in a bad mood. At 8, the boss arrived. He walked silently through the premises, inspecting the dishes. "And where is the medium saucepan?" He looked at the dishwasher with a piercing gaze. Apparently, he wanted to say something more but stopped. The director pulled the dishes from the cabinet and found it. He looked at Laura again. She held her breath in fear. "What did he want from you?" Lino whispered puzzledly after Santiago left. "What happened?" "Lino, I don't understand this person at all, and I refuse to understand him," hissed the dishwasher angrily. "Maybe there's something wrong with his head. Honestly, he behaves like an idiot." From that day, Laura felt that the director was giving her sidelong glances. Apparently, he was planning to fire her, but he was waiting for something. In reality, the boss was just in a bad mood, and when he was in a bad mood, he could say anything. He decided to save the dishwasher's firing for the right moment, but it was already beyond doubt for him that she had to go. November came, and Laura felt increasing internal tension. Santiago said nothing to her, but she could read the meaning of his cold looks. She understood that he didn't like her. For several days, he had been in a bad mood. The director left, and they took a brief break. Laura went outside. Not far from the cafe, there was an old tree with a bench underneath. It was a cold November day, and she bundled up and sat down. The fresh air invigorated her. She sat with her eyes closed and didn't notice when a man approached. "Oops!" She jumped, startled. "Sorry, I didn't see you." The man said nothing. He started rubbing his hands, which were covered with torn gloves. She looked closely. An old, worn jacket, a dirty hat, and a neglected face. Everything indicated that he was homeless. "Brr, it's so cold," said the stranger, looking at her. "My hands are freezing." "Where do you live?" Laura asked cautiously. "Do you have a home?" "Everyone has their own destiny," the man replied without looking up. "I'm homeless." "But where do you spend the night in this cold?" the woman asked, surprised. "When will winter come?" "Wherever I can," he replied briefly. "If God wills it, I'll survive this winter too." "Wait a moment." Laura jumped up. "I'll be right back, just don't go anywhere." The woman wanted to run, but a gust of wind almost knocked her down. She fought against it for a few seconds and finally managed to open the door. "Lino, while the boss is out, can I give that homeless man some hot coffee and pastries?" she pleaded with the chef. "It'll be on me." "Laura, I don't mind," said Lino. "Just make sure the boss doesn't catch you." Laura brought the homeless man coffee in a disposable cup and 2 pastries. "Here, eat," she said. "Unfortunately, I can't bring you anything else. Our boss is very strict." She blushed. The man nodded approvingly and took a bite of the pastry. Laura stayed for a moment and then returned to the cafe. From that day on, the homeless man started visiting them frequently. No one saw where he came from or where he went, but when the boss was away, Laura always brought him food. "What's your name?" she asked the stranger one day. "Stefan," he replied briefly. "I was named after my grandfather." "What a lovely name," the woman smiled. "I'm Laura. I work as a dishwasher in the cafe." "And how much do they pay you?" the man asked with interest. "I think these days, no one gets paid much." "I like the owner of our cafe. He seems like a kind person, but the manager, does he yell at you?" Stefan looked at her. "Or doesn't he pay you?" "No, there's no problem with the pay," she sighed. "It's just strange. He doesn't talk to us. He looks at us like we're invisible. Our boss fired so many employees without reason. He'll probably fire me soon." "Why do you think that?" Stefan was surprised. "Did he tell you?" "That's the thing," Laura said, annoyed. "He doesn't say anything. He just comes up and announces that someone is fired without any explanation." "How is that possible?" Stefan exclaimed. "You need a special reason for everything." "But here it happens without any reason," the dishwasher said tiredly. "Well, excuse me, but I have to go. The boss should be here soon." The woman got up quickly and left. It was getting colder, and she worried about her new acquaintance. The next day, Laura brought 2 old blankets and a pillow to work. During lunch, she gave them to Stefan. "Oh, Laura, thank you so much," the man exclaimed. "I'm sure I won't be cold this winter." "Stefan," she said cautiously, "what happened to you? How did you end up on the street?" "Nothing new," he sighed. "My wife took everything. She got a lover." "But why didn't you find another job?" the woman asked, surprised. "It's clear you're an intelligent person." "I can't do it now. There's a very important reason for that," he replied. "I'm sorry, but I can't talk about it yet." "Well, that's okay. Leave it at that," the woman said. "Anyway, I really hope everything will be all right with you." A few days later, something very unpleasant happened. The manager was in the cafe when the door opened and Stefan came in. He wanted to warm up a bit. He stood in the corner by the door for a few minutes when Santiago noticed him. "Who are you?" he exclaimed, surprised. "What do you want here?" "Can I stay here for just 5 minutes?" the man asked. "I'm freezing. It's very cold outside." "Get out of here," the manager shouted at the top of his lungs. "I'll teach you a lesson, you scoundrel." Everyone was shocked. It was the first time they heard their boss yell and curse. He ran to the utility room, grabbed a broom, and started hitting Stefan with all his strength. "Santiago, what are you doing?" The others tried to calm him down. "He didn't do anything." The homeless man wiped the blood from his face and slowly walked out onto the street. Laura covered her face with her hands and started crying. "Everyone back to work," the manager shouted, "or the same thing will happen to each of you." The chef, Miguel, and Laura went to the kitchen. The manager moved to his office for a few more minutes. Then he left. When they heard the car leave, everyone rushed to the hall. "What was that?" Lino asked, surprised. "He behaves like a sadist. If I hadn't calmed him down, he would have killed that homeless man." "Monster!" Laura shouted and ran out into the street. She wanted to help Stefan, but there was no sign of him. The manager didn't show up at work for almost 2 weeks. Well, he did come for a few minutes, took some documents, and left again. He stopped even greeting his employees. Stefan disappeared after that. Laura worried about him and cried for the first few days, but there was no way to help him. She was afraid to bring a stranger into her home. She decided to offer him some money. She felt that Stefan was a good person. Life just hadn't been kind to him. It was early December, and snow covered everything. Santiago seemed to have calmed down a bit and started talking to the chef, but ignored everyone else. That day, he left for some matter, and Laura was taking care of the hall when she thought she saw someone sitting on a bench. She quickly put on her coat and ran outside. "Stefan, you're back!" the woman exclaimed. "I was so worried about you. How are you?" "Hi, Laura," the man said cheerfully. "I'm glad to see you too. I'm fine." "Please, take this," she said, putting something in Stefan's hand. "And there's some food in the bag. I'm sorry, I can't stay long." The man thanked her. When she left, he opened his hand and found money inside. Stefan smiled happily. Laura was glad that Stefan had started coming back, but now he visited less frequently than before. She didn't understand how, but she always felt when he would come. Every time Laura looked out the window, he was already waiting. On that very cold day, with snow falling since morning, Laura saw Stefan on the bench. The manager was not at work. She told Lino that he would only come the next day. Laura opened the back door and led Stefan inside. "Here, let's warm up a bit," she said cheerfully. "I'll bring you hot coffee and something to eat." "Thanks, Laura," he said, "but you're taking a risk. What if the boss comes?" "Thank God he's not the owner," she replied. "And besides, Estefanio, I've managed to save some money. We'll rent a place for you to stay." The man looked at her intently. His expression was confused at first, but then his eyes lit up. "Laura, thank you. You don't need to do this," he finally said. "I can manage on my own." He finished eating, and they were chatting when the manager unexpectedly entered the kitchen. "Who let you in here?" He grabbed a large spoon and swung it at the homeless man with all his might. Estefanio pulled his hands off the table, and the manager missed. "I hate beggars so much," Santiago shouted angrily, grabbing a kitchen knife. Lino burst into the kitchen and froze. Laura was paralyzed too. No one could move. Laura herself didn't understand how she grabbed something under her hand and threw it with all her strength at the manager. The knife fell from his hand, and an old pan clattered to the floor. Santiago grabbed his injured hand and screamed in pain. Laura quickly pulled Estefanio out. "Get out of here!" The boss's threatening voice echoed. "I won't forgive you for this." Laura grabbed her things and ran out into the street. She looked for Estefanio, but he had disappeared somewhere. Somehow, Laura made it home. Her whole body was trembling. She broke down in tears and collapsed on the bed. That night, she took a sedative to try to sleep. Late at night, Lino called. "Laura, how are you?" he asked anxiously. "I'm in complete shock. He almost killed that man. I've had enough of this. Tomorrow, I'll write a resignation letter. He's a complete idiot. You saw it, right? Dino, I still can't believe it," she cried. "Of course, I also have some blame, but hating someone just because they're homeless. Dino, I'm speechless. And besides, Estefanio didn't do anything to him, to us, or to anyone else." Laura was shaking so much that even the pills didn't help. She only fell asleep towards the morning, and even then, nightmares tormented her. In her dream, Santiago suddenly turned into some kind of monster that wanted to devour her. She ran away from him for a long time, exhausted. Finally, she fell and saw a large shadow approaching. But suddenly, everything cleared up. She got up from the ground, and Estefanio was beside her. "Sant Estefanio, the Savior," she whispered, and with those words, she woke up. "My God, it seems this won't end like this," she whispered and shivered. That day, Laura wasn't in a condition to do anything. She slept almost all day. Around 7 in the evening, someone rang her doorbell. "Who is it?" she asked fearfully. "What do you want?" "Open the door, please. It's the police." Someone answered. "We need to ask you some questions." The woman looked through the peephole. Indeed, there were people in police uniforms at the door. Laura opened the door and wanted to ask for their documents, but in an instant a policeman rushed into the hallway and she couldn't keep up with him. "Here it is, look," he said cheerfully, showing some ring. "Come in," he ordered the policeman Laura saw at the cafe with the manager. "What is this?" she asked, surprised. "And where is your search warrant?" "This is the ring you stole from the cafe manager where you worked until today," said the policeman. "What?" "I'm not afraid of anything," Laura shouted. "You planted it. Call another team to check the fingerprints. Mine aren't on it." "So, "You're also accusing the police of wrongdoing," said the man, glaring at her. "That's another charge. Take her to the station and bring the witnesses. Everyone heard it." The woman turned pale, unable to believe it was true. But when they put the handcuffs on, she realized, "This can't be. It's a mistake," she whispered. Laura was taken to the station and placed in a cell. Waiting for further investigation, with trembling hands, she took out her phone and called her son. "Where?" Job exclaimed in surprise. "I'm coming right now." A few hours later, Laura's son arrived at the station. He had been talking with the police for a long time. At 3 a.m., they arrived at Laura's house. "Mum, I understand everything, but if you saw that this man is despicable, why did you keep working with him?" Job was angry. "He wants money, and a lot of it." "Job, but they planted this ring on me themselves." She cried. "And now what do I do?" "I still don't know," he said, exhausted. "I'll talk to my boss today. He has some connections. Maybe he can help us." "And you stay home for now," he said, looking sternly at his mother. "As for the defamation charge against the police, I took care of it. I paid some money, so they dropped it." At 5 in the morning, Job called a taxi and went home. Laura collapsed on the bed in exhaustion. She remained unconscious until almost afternoon. It was 6 when she woke up. "God, what happened to me last night?" She remembered. What will happen now? It was all set up by the manager. He promised to get revenge on me, and he did. So, with this policeman, they're involved in shady deals together. What a scumbag. He really seems like some kind of maniac. I've never seen such inhumanity in anyone. Laura got out of bed and tried to eat something, but nothing would go down her throat. If this is really a ring with those diamonds, why isn't the police questioning where the cafe manager got such an expensive piece of jewelry on a low salary? Laura reasoned. Maybe it's not even his ring, if it's worth around $1 million, and I've never seen it on him. The woman tried to understand what she could hold on to. The fact that the police themselves planted this ring was beyond doubt, and what he wanted to do didn't compare to what Laura did. The manager wanted to kill someone, and she only hurt his hand. The cost of the pan was irrelevant. It wasn't that expensive. Laura really wanted to go out and take a walk. Her head was spinning from all this, but she was scared. She felt like Santiago would be watching her from the corner. The woman paced nervously around the apartment. She went out to the balcony. A cold breeze hit her, but it made Laura feel better. Finally, she went back inside and turned on the TV. Maybe it'll distract me a bit. She sighed and sat on the couch. But that day, nothing interested her. She wanted to call her son, but he might be busy now, and after work, Job wanted to talk to his boss. He might help with a lawyer, or at least advise on the best course of action in this situation. Then the phone rang. "Laura Montero?" The voice sounded familiar. "We'd like to talk to you." The man got out of the car and breathed in the air of Los Angeles. He was filled with pleasure, closed his eyes and enjoyed the moment. "How wonderful it is here," the man exclaimed, heading towards the big house. He easily opened the door and went in. A small girl of about 7 appeared in the doorway. "Mom, Dad's here," she shouted and ran towards the man. He hugged the girl and lifted her up. After a few minutes, a tall young woman appeared in the yard. "Dad, hi," she said cheerfully. "You didn't tell me you were coming." "Dorothea, hello." He hugged her. "I'm glad to see you all. I just came for a few days. There's a National Literature Festival in Tenerife tomorrow. Well, let's get something to drink and talk. It's already hot outside," suggested the daughter. They went inside the house. After a few minutes, everyone settled comfortably in the living room. Dorothea bombarded her father with questions. "Dad, how are you? How's your work going?" she asked anxiously about everything. "Everything's fine, darling," he replied. "The publishing house is doing as usual. Same with the magazines. We are working at a regular pace. Tomorrow there will be the presentation of the Spanish Literature Award. I want to see it. Besides, they're organizing a good exhibition. I'd like to select some works for translation for my publishing house. New trends are gaining momentum. You have to stay updated." "Dad, do you ever regret leaving that?" Dorothea asked curiously. "You know, sometimes it hits me, and I feel like sitting down to write again." He sighed. "But then I realize I'm more of an appreciator than a creator. Of course, I still regret burning all my manuscripts. But you have to be realistic, dear. Every time I remember what your mother and I went through." In his childhood, Arturo was called a dreamer because he was always inventing something. He wrote stories, poems, and various short tales. Over time, the boy's dreams grew into something more significant. He finished school and planned to enter the philology faculty, but his parents vehemently opposed it. The last year of school was a constant struggle between Arturo and his parents. A battle Arturo won. He set his sights on the capital. Surprisingly, he was accepted, although his parents didn't have enough money to support him during his studies. Their small provincial town didn't offer enough opportunities to earn money. Anyway, the boy managed as best he could. He washed dishes, worked as a night janitor, and even gave guided tours. In his spare time, he wrote, and he thought he did quite well. In his 4th year, he met his future wife, Viola. She came from an intellectual family. Her parents were doctors. Their love story wouldn't have amounted to anything if Viola hadn't shown her strong character. Naturally, Arturo's parents didn't accept her. Viola insisted on following her own path. Therefore, she was peacefully expelled from the house. The next 3 years were the hardest of their lives. Balancing studies and work was extremely difficult. Viola was in her 3rd year, aspiring to become a medical engineer. Times were tough, and Arturo Hidalgo still couldn't understand how they survived. Their diet mainly consisted of pea soup, and that was constant. Viola turned out to be a strong woman. Arturo never heard complaints, reproaches, or tantrums from her. Arturo dreamed of becoming a real writer. When he finished his novel, he took his manuscripts to one of the professors. However, at that time, the student didn't understand people well. A month later, the man with glasses returned to work, shaking his head. "Sorry, Arturo, but this isn't for you," he declared dryly. "Forget about writing." That day, angry, Arturo burned all his manuscripts and never wrote again. It was only many years later that he saw a book by that man and, upon reading it, realized it was blatant plagiarism. The plot and details of the story were completely copied from his novel. The author essentially only changed the names. In his final year at the university, one of his classmates asked Arturo to read his thesis and make corrections. The boy gladly did so. Subsequently, not only his course, but also students from other faculties brought him papers to review. He not only earned some money, but also received a job offer as an editor at a small magazine. At that moment, it seemed like a miracle to him and Viola. They couldn't imagine that 3 years later, Arturo would open his first small publishing house and in 10 years would run the country's leading publications. Then he started dealing with magazines, one on popular science, the other on travel and adventures. Arturo kept reading a lot, also looking for young talents. Some modern authors were published and promoted personally by him. Over time, the publishing house reached an international level, but unfortunately, Viola didn't live to see those days. She was around 40 years old when she died. That day there was heavy snowfall and a terrible accident occurred on the road. A car crashed into the front of 3 cars at high speed. Viola's car was the closest. She wasn't even taken to the hospital. Dorothea was 15 at the time and barely coped with her mother's death. Almost 10 years ago, the daughter married a diplomat working in Spain, so they now lived in 2 countries. "Dad, what about your cafe or restaurant?" Dorothea asked, sipping cold lemonade. "I still can't understand how that happened." He laughed. The thing is, a cafe was never in Arturo's plans. First of all, he lived in the capital, or rather, in its suburbs. Secondly, it wasn't his field at all, and he didn't particularly need that money. Once, he had a heated argument with a friend. Arturo complained that with such global plans, he had stopped seeing the simple life. Of course, he helped aspiring writers and organized various awards, but it wasn't enough. He wanted real help. That's when Poncho suggested he open a charitable foundation. "Poncho, nowadays there's a lot of philanthropy," Arturo sighed. "You know, I'd like something real, something that works immediately. I want to help ordinary people." "Well, you could build a hospital in a provincial town," his friend replied. "Not that. I want something more, but I can't put it into words," said the frustrated editor. "Then open something. Create some job vacancies and pay people well," Poncho simply replied. "That would definitely be real." "Exactly," Arturo exclaimed joyfully. "Now we need to think about what and where." They opened a map, and Arturo simply pointed with his finger. Both friends were surprised. "Wow," Poncho finally said. "Arturo, that's really far from the capital. How are you going to get there?" The man scratched his head and was about to give up on the idea, but then stopped. "I'm going to open a cafe there," he exclaimed cheerfully. "Exactly. I'll rent some buildings and hire employees." "Arturo, you need to take this seriously," objected his friend. "Even if it's a provincial town, the restaurant business is very time-consuming. Trust me, my brother has 2 restaurants, I know. Poncho, I'll create jobs for people and gain new experience," the man replied happily. And so he decided to go for it. 6 months later, Arturo had his own cafe. At first it was complicated, but then everything somehow worked out. He paid his bills regularly, and the manager never complained. "Dad, you're not 30 anymore." Dorothea looked at her father with concern. "Maybe it's time to let go of the cafe." "Dorothea, I've thought about it," he sighed. "It's a shame, of course. If I close it and people lose their jobs, there are over 20 people working there. Although, maybe someone valuable will buy it and the staff can keep their jobs. I'll fly there soon, check everything out, and then we'll see." "Dad, let's explore the island today," suggested Dorothea. "After the exhibition, we'll go to the mainland. Nora is already tired of being here. We'll be back in the fall. So we'll celebrate her birthday at home this year." Grandpa was happy. "I see her only a few times a year. I can't even enjoy her company." They had breakfast, and Dorothea brought her car. Grandpa and granddaughter happily got in. The car slowly started, and they headed to the beach, which was truly impressive. The clear turquoise water glistened under the sun. The golden sand left an unforgettable impression. Nora was playing with her mother not far from the shore. The water had a gentle entry, and the child could swim safely. As it was morning, there were few people, so the swim went very well. "Dorothea, let's go to the botanical garden," her father suggested after a few hours. "I don't feel like going to the zoo or the aquarium." A few hours later, they were in Puerto de la Cruz. It was one of Arturo's favorite places. Of course, he loved the sea, but the local tropical plants drove him crazy. Unlike the flora of the central region, many of these plants looked like real aliens. "I love it so much," The man rejoiced like a child approaching a huge rubber tree. "Look at its adventitious roots." The tree seemed enormous because of the roots hanging from its branches. It looked very unusual. Arturo didn't just want to touch it with his hands, so to speak, but also to walk among its intricate roots. The group curiously examined breadfruit and pepper trees. Then they headed to the greenhouse, where the most exotic orchids were cultivated. "They're so beautiful." Dorothea admired the flowers. "Although they're parasites, their fragrance is delicate and intoxicating." "Yes," her father agreed. "The only thing is it's hard to breathe here. High humidity, in short, a real tropical climate." They spent about 2 hours in the botanical garden. Before heading home, Arturo suggested stopping at one of the small cafes for lunch. "Yes, it's not like ours," he laughed. "You won't find cakes or sweets here, but you know, for some reason it tastes better here. Or maybe it's because the climate here makes digestion work differently." "Dad, it's because we have very fresh seafood and we eat it with vegetables," his daughter replied. "You know, I don't even want dessert here. Even when I bake a homemade cake, we can't eat it for several days afterward. The food here is so heavy, it doesn't feel right. Do you want something light? Although, on the other hand, I can't say everything here is dietetic." "When is Remigio coming home?" the man asked. "I'm in Spain and still haven't met my son-in-law." "He'll be here this weekend," Dorothea replied. "So, you'll definitely meet him. You know, I've been thinking maybe we should move to the mainland. Remigio has an apartment near his work at the embassy, but I understand I won't be able to. I've already gotten used to the quiet life. The hustle and bustle scare me, and Nora goes to school here. She loves her class. Of course, I miss my husband a lot, but we still haven't solved this painful problem." "I understand you, Dorothea," her father sighed. "With time, you'll find a solution." "Dad," Dorothea began cautiously, "maybe you should finally settle down." "Honey, I'm not against it," the man replied. "But where am I going to find a woman? That's a big problem. Many have courted me, but what's the use? They all want one thing, money, and I need someone like your mother, a loyal wife and companion, someone who will be with me in both wealth and poverty. Dorothea, I want to be loved for who I am, not for my money." "Well, you're right about that, Dad," she supported him. "You know, maybe that's why I don't want to go back home. Here, I'm not particularly different from others. I live like everyone else, but when I return to that house, people immediately start making unnecessary connections, establishing all sorts of ties. I don't want friendships based on money either. I've befriended 2 mums from Nora's school, so we often have dinner together and go for walks with the kids. Despite the Spanish warmth, they don't ask unnecessary questions. We're even planning a short cruise around the Canary Islands in September, so I don't get bored here at all." It was nearly 8 in the evening, and Arturo enjoyed watching the sunset. "It's so beautiful here," he said, inhaling the sea breeze. "The Paradise Islands." The time difference was small, only 2 hours, so the man slept well that night. The next day he woke up early. He needed to get to the island's capital, Santa Cruz de Tenerife. Here, at one of the island's landmarks and architectural symbols, the Tenerife Auditorium, the literary awards ceremony was taking place. Arturo approached the building excitedly. He barely knew Spanish, but he was fluent in English. There were always 1 or 2 people at these events who could help with translation if needed, so the man wasn't worried about that. In the conference hall, a lot of people had already gathered, discussing something excitedly. An editor had briefly reviewed the works that would be nominated today, but knew more detailed presentations would be given. 3 well-known authors and 2 newcomers were among the top 5. Arturo was especially interested in the latter. He loved working with novelists. Arturo encountered many challenges, but from experience, he knew they always brought something new. Most people tried to imitate, but among them were true gems. Those who weren't afraid to assert themselves created masterpieces. By 11 o'clock, everyone had gathered, and the presenters opened the literary festival. The room fell silent. The audience enjoyed listening to brief summaries and interesting facts about the books and their authors. Arturo was captivated by one book in particular. Its title was something like Eyes That Saw 300 Years, a debut novel told from the perspective of an old tree in a remote mountain village in Spain. The tree witnessed wars, the village's prosperity, and the decline of a great dynasty. The book told the story of a family whose members were born in this village over the past 300 years. Intrigue, adventure, love, and revenge intertwined with local culture and traditions. At the end of the book, the tree is felled, and a new shoot appears, symbolizing the beginning of a new story and the endless cycle of life. It gave me chills. The editor shuddered. We definitely need to acquire this book. It had such energy that it took one's breath away. Unfortunately, it didn't win. It came in second. First place went to a well-known author whose new book narrated events of 1936, known as The Red Terror. It wasn't just a historical work. The novel told the story of two friends who believed they were fighting for a better future for their country. However, as with any bloodshed, a moment of realization came. One friend realized that nothing could be resolved with killings and wanted to leave the group. But his friend couldn't understand this and saw his refusal as betrayal. The book ends with the radical friend killing his companion. Arturo was as happy as a child. He loved these events. Deep down, he might have seen himself in the place of these authors. Some nervously fidgeted with anticipation, while others only arrived at the end to avoid intense nervous tension. After the festival closed, the editor approached the winner and the runner-up, and through an interpreter discussed terms for translating their books. "Dad, how did it go?" Dorothea ran to him as he entered the house. "How was the award ceremony?" "Honey, I now have enough inspiration for the next 6 months," he said, hugging her. "You can't imagine how fascinating it all was. I got permission from the authors of 2 books. I'm amazed." "I'm so happy for you," Dorothea exclaimed joyfully. "Dad, Remigio is coming tonight." "Oh, my day is filled with new things," he laughed. "I'll be looking forward to it." "He'll be here for dinner at 8, she added. "Will you come with us to the market? I want to get fresh seafood and goat meat." "Dorothea, forgive me, but I have so many impressions that I just need to rest a bit." "It's okay. I'll take Nora with me, so you won't be disturbed for a couple of hours." She kissed her father on the cheek and went to the local market with the girl. In the evening, Dorothea's husband arrived for a few days, and they all enjoyed swimming in the sea and exploring the island. "You know, Arturo, I've gotten used to being here, but sometimes I still miss the capital," Remigio sighed. "But I have to admit, Barcelona is an incredible city. I love it so much. It has everything: beauty, hustle, beaches. But when I return to Tenerife, I start to understand Dorothea. There's so much tranquility and peace here that the soul just starts to breathe freely." "I understand you, Remigio," the father-in-law sighed. "In the past, the surroundings saved me, but now the capital has grown so much that we are already living within the city limits. And with it came the hustle, dirt, and other annoying disturbances. Honestly, I also want to move somewhere. I don't know, maybe explore the south. My publishing house won't disappear, and neither will the magazines, but the constant noise has started to irritate me." "Arturo, maybe you could stay in Spain with us," the son-in-law suggested. "The weather here is great all year round, and the food is delicious. Remigio, if I wasn't alone but with a family, maybe, he said sadly, but I also don't want to constantly bother you here. On Sunday, they all went to Barcelona together. Arturo had been here before, but he adored Gaudi's architecture, his impressive basilica, and the magical park filled with light and inspiration. How could he create something like this without a single drawing? The man marveled at the building. Without a doubt, he was a genius. They had been wandering around Barcelona almost all day. That evening, Arturo had to fly back. He was already expected at the publishing house. There were matters to resolve. "Dad, come more often," Dorothea said with tears in her eyes. "I will miss you so much." "Dorothea, you'll fly to the capital in a couple of months. So in a way, we'll see each other very soon." He comforted his daughter. The man kissed his granddaughter and shook hands with his son-in-law. They said their goodbyes. His plane was departing at 8. He had 20 minutes left for check-in and joined the boarding line. Arturo really didn't want to go home. He would have liked to stay longer, but there were matters both at work and regarding the cafe. He didn't want to sell it, but he understood that he didn't have the strength for it anymore. "If everything goes well and there are no problems, I'll sell it in a year," he reflected. "But if something goes wrong, I'll deal with it immediately." In the capital, it was a cool August night, or rather, early morning. He took a taxi and in a few hours was home. The place was completely silent. The owner opened the door and entered the hallway. "My God, what a contrast!" he exclaimed in surprise. "Just a few hours ago I had a family, and now I'm completely alone again," he sighed. The man entered the kitchen and made a coffee. He thought about what to do next. "I don't want to stay here in the capital," he said aloud. "But where should I go?" He finished his coffee and went to bed. Tomorrow he needed to be at the publishing house. The next day, at 9 sharp, the man was already in his office. The editor shared his impressions with his colleagues and distributed gifts. They enthusiastically discussed the news and tackled current problems. Things were going well at the publishing house. They already had the entire year's schedule planned, so they just stuck to the established plan. In the afternoon, Arturo agreed to meet his friend at their old favorite restaurant. They always loved spending time there. "So, how was your trip?" Poncho asked curiously. "How's the weather there now?" "You know, it was wonderful," his friend replied cheerfully. "Poncho, it's so nice there." Poncho Gonzalez owned a small tin products factory. They had been friends for many years and even studied together. Poncho had completed an engineering degree, studying in the same class as Viola, but didn't pursue his field. Even in college, he tried his hand at entrepreneurship. Initially, he traded electronic goods and later moved into tinware. He had been working in that field for many years, had a nice house, lived in the capital, and traveled abroad, so he was content. He didn't aspire to great heights, deciding to settle down. "Marta and I are planning to go to Croatia at the end of September," said Poncho. "We need a little break too." "I'd actually like to stay longer, but there are matters at the publishing house and I have to sort out issues with the cafe," said Arturo with frustration. "Something needs to be done about it." "Arturo, just sell it already," exclaimed his friend. "Why do you need it?" "I constantly think about it myself," responded the man. "I decided to take a look. If everything is fine, I'll keep it for another year, but if there are problems, I'll look for a buyer." "You don't even need to wait a year," insisted his friend. "Go and sell it." "Poncho, I can't do that. There are people there," sighed Arturo. "They depend on me." "Your compassion won't lead to anything good," said Poncho, dissatisfied. Poncho, I don't want to live in the capital, declared Arturo unexpectedly. I'm leaving. Where to? His friend looked at him surprised. Do you want to go to Spain? No, he replied calmly. I have business here at the publishing house. I can't work like this, and I don't want to bother Dorotea. They've gotten used to their lives. So, where do you plan to go? Poncho wondered. I'm not sure yet, he said, lowering his head. I want to go somewhere south. I think it's only good for vacations, opined his friend. Living there is impossible. There's either no water or bad water. Food is expensive, though money issues probably wouldn't concern you. To be honest, I don't want to be by the sea. Arturo scratched his head. In general, I haven't decided yet. I'm leaving at the end of the week. I'll see how my cafe is doing. I'll also take a look around the area. Well, it's certainly a small town. Poncho tried to dissuade his friend. Okay, we'll see, sighed the editor. When I get back, I'll tell you everything. It would be better if you moved to Spain, grumbled Poncho. The days passed quickly. At the publishing house, everything was ready for the fall release of new publications. Samples of colorful magazines adorned the owner's desk. On Thursday, they decided to hold a big meeting to discuss current matters. So on Friday, Arturo could leave peacefully. He visited his cafe and returned the same day. So, how was everything? His friend asked with interest. Is everything okay there? Poncho, I'm not sure, he said, scratching his head anxiously. I still don't understand. What do you mean? Poncho wondered. Did something happen there? I don't understand myself, but Arturo took a deep breath and looked out the window. What's going on, Arturo? Poncho asked impatiently. Were the workers drunk? Did they disrespect you? No, there's no problem with that, he finally responded. Poncho, it's as if something is happening there. You see, they stand there in silence like they can't say a word. It's not the first time. Maybe it was like that before, but I didn't notice. This time, it just stunned me. It's like they're afraid to say anything. Maybe their manager intimidated them, Poncho suggested. Possibly, but then what? Arturo pondered. At my publishing house, they can tell me anything if they need something or disagree with me. But there, the people are so scared. When I ask them to talk, they immediately look down. I can't understand anything. Well, call Ricardo. Have his people check everything there, Poncho suggested. I think if something is happening there, you won't find out easily. And maybe I just imagined it all, and I'll be chasing someone away for no reason, the editor said thoughtfully. So, what do you want to do? Poncho asked, surprised. I don't know yet. I need to think, Arturo responded calmly. When I come up with something, I'll let you know. Besides, I need to finish everything now to have free time when my family arrives. We'll celebrate Nora's birthday, and then I'll decide something about it. Are they coming to the capital in October? His friend exclaimed cheerfully. That's really good news. The girl must have grown a lot. I haven't seen her in almost a year. Time passed unnoticed. It was October 10th, and Arturo was receiving his daughter's family at the airport. Nora had a week off from school, so they planned to relax and visit friends. Remigio was flying in about 10 days later for his daughter's birthday. He only had a few days off. For his granddaughter's birthday, Arturo decided to take the girls to the fairy tale park. In the evening at 7, when her dad arrived, they had reserved a place at a kids' cafe. The girl was very happy. She had enough impressions for several days. She bought several souvenirs for her friends and teachers and wanted to take them to school. Mom, Grandpa, I still want to go to the candy store, said Nora. Can we pick out candies and cookies together? After the park, they stopped at a huge confectionery store where the best sweets from the factories were sold. "Wow, look at this!" Nora's eyes sparkled. "I think my friends will love it. I'll give big chocolate bars to the teachers." "Nora, sweetheart, that's not all," said her grandpa mysteriously. "You'll get the rest of the gifts at home." By 5 in the afternoon, they were already back home, and the girl was admiring her new folding bike, roller skates, and a huge dollhouse. "Dad, now we need to order a plane to transport all this," laughed Dorothea. "This is something, Nora, you definitely don't have this yet." But her daughter didn't listen. She was excitedly examining all her gifts. She absolutely loved everything. 1 hour later, Remigio arrived, and they began to get ready to head to the cafe, which was not far from their home, the capital, so to speak. The son-in-law chuckled when they met and they got stuck in traffic. "We'd walk faster. But there'll be something to remember," the grandfather smiled. "You're used to walking everywhere in Barcelona, and here at least you can ride in a car. Or just sit in it." Dorothea laughed. "Ah, yes," Remigio sighed. "Sometimes you just want to go home, but when you do, it's the same thing. Is Poncho coming?" "Of course," Arturo chuckled. "Where would we be without him? He's like a full-fledged member of our family. Both he and Marta and their grandson Silvio will come. They'll finally meet Nora. It never worked out before." Poncho's car was parked next to the cafe. They all got out and greeted Dorothea's family. The evening went well. The kids played together in the playground, and the adults chatted. They talked about business, work, and simply enjoyed conversing. The next day, Dorothea, her daughter, and Remigio went to visit her parents. He had to leave the next day, but Arturo's daughter stayed a few more days. They all went to the zoo and the botanical garden and just strolled around the city together. "Dad, what have you decided about the cafe?" his daughter asked one afternoon. "Have you been there yet?" "Yes, in mid-August," he replied. "But I still haven't decided. Dorothea, something doesn't seem right there to me. I'll go there again after you've left. Probably sell it." "That's the right decision," his daughter supported. "You have more than enough with your publishing house." "Dorothea, I've decided to leave the capital," the father said calmly. "I can't stay here anymore." "Where to?" She looked at him intently. "Maybe some village or resort-style settlement near a big city." "Dad, that's okay." Dorothea was delighted. "If you can still do your job, so be it." The next day, Arturo's daughter and granddaughter flew out, and in the afternoon, his friend came to visit him. "So, have you decided?" he asked with interest. "Are you going back to your cafe?" "Yes," he replied briefly, and added, "Poncho, I've come up with something, but no one must know yet. I may need your help. If so, I'll call you then." He winked mysteriously, leaving his friend completely puzzled. "Yes, it's me," Laura answered tremulously. "Who are you?" "My name is Arturo. I'm the owner of the cafe where you used to work." The same voice spoke. "I'd like to ask you something." "I'm sorry, but I don't work there anymore," she cried. "I'm afraid of everything that happened." "Please, don't be afraid," the man said calmly. "Tell me, what happened?" "Santiago fired me," she cried. "I didn't do anything." "The manager fired you?" he asked, astonished. "Why? Did he say something?" "I let someone in for 20 minutes to warm up, and he grabbed a knife and almost killed him," Laura said, horrified. "The manager not only fired me for that, but he also got back at me. Yesterday, his friend, a policeman, and his men came to my house and planted some ring. Now they've opened a criminal case against me and are demanding a lot of money. I didn't take anything. I don't need anything from him." She couldn't calm down. "Laura, please, calm down." The cafe owner tried to stop her tears. "Listen to what I'm going to tell you. I know Estefanio." The woman stopped crying, and everyone fell silent. She was in shock and didn't know what to say. "You know Estefanio?" she uttered, amazed. "Did you send him here?" "Yes," Arturo replied briefly. "When I last visited, I felt something was going on in my cafe. I decided to check what was happening and sent my man there. I'm sorry, he couldn't tell you anything." "I understand," Laura managed to articulate barely. "Indeed, strange things are happening in your cafe. We only have 6 people working, and those who were in the lounge last time I had never seen before or after. How is that possible?" Now the owner himself was astonished. According to the documents, there were 22 people there, including the manager. Now the owner fell silent. He was simply surprised. He tried to figure out what to do next. "Laura, I really need your help," he finally said. "If possible, please come back to the cafe." "But how?" The woman turned pale. "Firstly, the manager fired me, and secondly, he accused me of theft." "Don't worry, I'll handle all this," the cafe owner said. "I'll talk to him. No one will find out. I can't do it without you. I have to go there myself." She wondered if he would just kill me. "I don't think he or anyone else will call you in the next few days," Arturo replied. "Don't worry, Estefanio will be with you." "Okay, I'll try," she said through tears. "But now I'm afraid for Estefanio. After the manager almost killed him, I don't want him to take risks." "Don't worry, I'll warn him. He'll be very cautious," said the owner, who bid farewell and hung up. "Wow!" exclaimed Laura, amazed. What does all this mean? Spent the rest of the day pondering what would happen next and who Estefanio was. "So he's not a vagabond," the woman rejoiced. "He's a good man." It was around 3 when someone's phone rang in the cafe. The manager rushed to his office. "Yes, Arturo, I'm listening," he said, a bit nervously. "Has something happened?" "Santiago, I want to warn you that after the new year, towards the end of January, there will be a serious inspection at our cafe. I ask that all employees who were last in the salon be present at work, including cleaners and dishwashers. If anyone has left by that date, I ask that you arrange for them to occasionally show up for work." "Has anyone resigned during this time?" The manager couldn't articulate a word. The dishwasher left on her own. The others seemed to be in their place. "All right. Please ask her to come back," the restaurant owner said calmly. "We don't want to arouse suspicion from the police or the tax office. If there's a significant change, they'll start investigating everything in detail and they might find something. I have no doubt that our documents are in order, but they could unsettle us. God forbid. Also, make sure all the documents are in order. They might scrutinize everything minutely." "All right," said Santiago, his lips pale. "I'll take care of it." After the phone call, he paced nervously back and forth and finally dialed a number. "Valerio, cancel everything with the ring," he said curtly. "We're facing a serious inspection. The owner wants the dishwasher back." "How am I supposed to know?" Valerio yelled angrily. "Just shred all these documents as if it never happened. We're going to get caught because of you." Santiago was furious. He overturned his office. The manager maliciously scattered documents around the room, threw a chair, and flipped a sofa. Finally, he calmed down. Santiago quickly left and headed to the kitchen. Chef Lino looked at him fearfully. "Call that idiot. Tell her to come back to work starting tomorrow," he said coldly. "Laura?" Lino asked, surprised. "You want her to work at the cafe again?" The manager didn't respond. He quickly dressed and left for his car. "Laura?" The chef still couldn't react. "The manager said you should come to work tomorrow." Did he really say that? The woman wondered. I can't believe it. I'm shocked too, said Lino. Anyway, let's do it. I'll be waiting for you tomorrow. At first, Laura didn't believe it, but an hour later she had another conversation. Laura, someone said, we apologize, but there was a mistake. This is about the ring from yesterday. We've closed the case. Sorry again. It's a miracle, the woman rejoiced and immediately called her son. Mum, don't get involved there, Job pleaded. Wasn't yesterday's problem enough? Son, he can't do anything to me now. Relax, reassured his mother. Besides, this won't last long. Well, do whatever you want, said the offended son, and hung up. The next day, Laura went to work. The manager didn't even look at her, as if she were empty space. The woman didn't pay him any attention either. The manager spent the whole day in his office, and at 6 in the evening, he went home. The cafe closed as usual at 8, and Laura left. Estefaniola was waiting on a bench. The woman ran towards him happily. Estefaniola, I'm so glad to see you, she said quickly. If you knew what happened next, she whispered in his ear. I know. The owner called me, said the man. Hello, Laura, he said. I'm also glad to see you. I'm glad everything turned out well. Yes, but he threw a ring at me through a policeman. He wanted to put me in jail, or rather, the manager wanted me to pay him a lot of money for it. Laura, let's get out of here, the man asked her. We need to talk seriously. She took his arm, and they turned the corner. Finding a secluded place on the street was difficult because everything was covered in snow. They also didn't want to run into people. Finally, the woman saw some covered gazebos, and they went in. Laura, listen to me carefully, Estefanio said. You and I are about to do a very dangerous job, so if you're scared, just tell me. What do we have to do? She asked fearfully. Is it related to our manager? Yes, he replied. Tonight, we have to break into the cafe and steal very important documents. But how? She responded curiously. I only have the key to the salon. I have the key to his office, he replied. The owner gave it to me, but I can't do it without you. You have to cover for me. All right, she unexpectedly responded. Where will we be waiting? It's already dark. We can enter the cafe now, said Estefanio. The alarm will sound and we won't be able to deactivate it quickly. I think we'll have about 15 minutes, and then the police will come. You have to watch for when the police arrive so we can escape. My car is behind the cafe. We need to be able to get into it. All right, the woman replied calmly. I understand everything. I'll open the cafe, deactivate the alarm, and wait for the police. You go into the office and get the documents you need. They emerged from their hiding spot and approached the car. Estefanio took something from there. 10 minutes later, Laura took a deep breath and opened the door. The alarm immediately sounded, but she quickly deactivated it. Estefanio was already in the manager's office. Damn, what a mess, he cursed, almost tripping over a fallen chair. What has this idiot done here? The man turned on the light. There were some documents scattered on the floor. He quickly gathered everything and put it in his bag. The computer was still on. What luck, the man exclaimed, inserted his USB drive and began downloading the documents he needed. He was almost done when Laura appeared in the doorway. He heard the police car approaching. Finally! Estefanio pulled out the USB drive and tucked it into his pocket. They ran out through the back door, got into the car, and drove away. Estefanio, hurry up, Laura shouted, and shh. They'll call for reinforcements now. They won't catch up to us, the man reassured her. Look at the snowfall. Estefanio halted the car in an alley. A police car passed by them. They stayed there, motionless, for probably an hour. Estefanio, what will happen now? Laura cried. Will they arrest us? "Laura, everything will be fine. I promise," the man responded tenderly. It was around 11 when the car stopped in front of Laura's house. "Laura, I'll explain everything later," the man said. "We'll see each other soon." The woman watched as the car drove away. She still couldn't believe what had happened in the last 2 days. "Oh God! So much has happened in my life in these 2 days!" she exclaimed in amazement and headed home. She didn't know what to do now. Moreover, it wasn't her shift the next day. In short, Laura decided not to go to work the next day. 2 days passed, but no one called her. On one hand, she was scared. On the other hand, she was burning with curiosity. "Lino, hi." She couldn't hold back anymore. "What's going on at work?" "Oh, Laura, things are very chaotic here," the chef said excitedly. "In short, we've been shut down for now. They say there are some inspections, police, tax authorities. Apparently, our director has finally played his last card. You know, in a way, it's good because how much longer can one work in such a hell?" "So now everyone will know about these ghost employees?" Laura said in shock. "Well, of course," the man responded. "All their secrets will come out now." Laura had been sitting at home for almost 4 days. It was late when her phone rang. "Laura, good afternoon," said Arturo. "Can we meet tomorrow around 10? Let's meet at our cafe." "At our cafe?" The woman was startled. "Is it open?" "No, but tomorrow no one will be there. I'd like to explain something to you, and of course thank you. And how's Estefanio?" Laura couldn't resist. "Is he okay?" "Yes, he's fine," the owner reassured her. "You'll see him tomorrow." Laura was very happy with that news. During these days, she had been very worried about Estefanio, but she didn't have his phone number or address to find out how he was. What if he's married? A cunning thought paralyzed her. After all, it turned out he wasn't really a homeless man. Laura liked this man a lot, but she tried to stop all these romantic thoughts because if he had a wife, there would be no room for any feelings. She tried to distract herself, but nothing worked. She turned off the TV and went to bed. The night was restless. Everything blurred. The cafe, the director, the owner, Estefanio. The next morning, Laura woke up early. She didn't know what to do. It was very cold outside, and going to work now to wait in the cold for several hours made no sense. Finally, it was 9 o'clock, and she left the house. Laura pushed the door, and it opened. It was almost 10 to 10, but there was already someone here. She went to the kitchen. Silence reigned there. Then she knocked on the director's door. "Come in." She heard a familiar voice. "Laura, is that you?" Arturo was sitting at the table. He was busy with some papers. "I'm sorry I couldn't meet you earlier," he said. "We needed to sort things out here." "And what will happen now?" she asked hesitantly. "Are you going to close the cafe?" "Let's start with what happened," the tired owner said. "I think you'll be interested to know about this. Santiago worked for me for over 5 years, and all this time it turned out he was embezzling on a large scale. And it wasn't just about the non-existent employees. He colluded with the local police chief, and together they were involved in several schemes. Let's start with leasing this building. It turns out it belonged to one person, and the policeman deceived him. Unable to pay him several million, he threw him in jail. They made fake documents. On one hand, they pocketed rent money. On the other hand, they hung enormous utility debts on this poor man. But thank God, many cases will be reviewed now. Another way they made money was this. Santiago constantly fired employees and hired new ones. Then this same policeman would use their passport data, and they would become informants, witnesses or complainants in his cases. For example, from the perspective of a former cafe employee, a complaint would be written to the police alleging that such a person had stolen assaulted, raped, and so on. An absolutely innocent person would be accused, and then, under the threat of imprisonment, the police chief extorted money from that person and then could simply close the case. Do you remember how easily they opened and closed the fake case about the missing ring? The woman was stunned. She didn't understand what to say. "But how is that possible?" Laura barely whispered. "Could they have been checked?" Laura, this is my fault," sighed the restaurant owner heavily. "I should have dealt with this a long time ago, but due to my naivety, I trust people too much. It's hard for me to imagine that someone could decide on something like this. Although, considering how much the former director hated ordinary people, one could imagine he was capable of something even worse." "Yes," the woman replied. "He almost killed Estefanio. By the way, where is he? Why? You told me yesterday that he would also come." "Laura, I must tell you the truth." Arturo was anxious. "Unfortunately, Estefanio is not here." "Something happened to him?" She got worried. "I've been worried about him all this time." "Laura, he's not here anymore because—" The man looked at her. "Because Estefanio is me. I had to pretend to be that character." "Forgive me, I couldn't tell you earlier. How can that be?" Laura said incredulously. "Estefanio, She covered her face with her hands and ran out of the cafe. She ran and ran. It hurt a lot, but at that moment Laura didn't even understand why she felt that way. Finally, she calmed down a bit. Estefanio was her hope, and maybe even her last love, and now it was time to erase him from her mind. The woman got tired and went home. She didn't feel the cold or the blizzard. As soon as she entered the house, her phone rang. "Laura, I beg you, please, forgive me," Arturo said. "I didn't want to cause you pain." "You don't even understand what you've done," the woman cried. "I loved him." "But does that change anything?" the man asked. "Yes, Estefanio is me." "So what difference does it make to you, Laura? You love me." It was only now that the woman began to realize what Arturo meant. "But it seemed to me that Estefanio loved me too," she resisted. "And you were just acting to carry out your plans." "Why would you think that?" he said excitedly. "Do you think love can be played with?" "I don't understand anything anymore," Laura cried. "Please, just leave me alone." "Laura, I love you too," the man finally said. "You loved me unconditionally and gave me your last money. Does it really matter that I'm rich, Laura? Believe me, I love you." "Well, shall we join the others?" Laura asked, getting into the car. A few hours later, they stopped on the federal highway near a small cafe. The man and the woman opened the door and sat at a table. "Laura? Arturo? Hi." Miguel approached them happily. "Are you visiting us or just passing by?" "I'll call the guys now." Lino and Fernando hurried out of the kitchen. They chatted happily. 3 years after the incident, Arturo settled all the matters and wanted to sell the cafe. But Lino suggested the boys buy it in installments, and the former owner agreed. They gathered some of the old staff and hired new people. Fernando won his lawsuit, and the former police chief paid him the full amount, plus damages. So they paid off all the cafe money in a year. "Lino, come on, bring your pastries quickly. I've been dreaming about them all the way," Laura laughed. "You haven't even tried our new mushroom pie." He winked mysteriously. "Bring everything," Arturo supported his wife. "Whatever we don't finish, we'll take with us." He laughed. "So, how are things here?" "Everything is going well for us," the chef replied. "Visitors and the boys are satisfied, and we decided to travel a bit," Arturo said. "Since we moved to the seaside, we stopped going anywhere." Laura, have you gotten used to the new life already? Miguel asked the woman. Oh, Miguel, sometimes I lie down and think, maybe we should get a cow. Laura laughed heartily. Arturo let me do everything in the house, so I'm happy. Miguel, sometimes I'm scared for our lawn. Arturo laughed. When I see her digging, I think it's all over. She complains all the time that 2 acres for a garden aren't enough for her. Let her do whatever she wants, and it would have been over long ago. They're so happy and we're so excited for you. Miguel smiled, looking at Laura and Arturo, admiring this wonderful couple.